My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Dickens, Volume 5, The Cratchits. Here's my novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery, holding it up so you can see the diagram. A novella by John Passfield. John facing Dickens in his writing room, Dickens surrounded by his characters. Here's the summary on the back of the novella. Writer John Passfield leaves his home, buys a coffee, and drives down to the shores of Lake Erie to perform a Christmas ritual, strolling along the beach at Port Maitland. It's something he's done for many years, but this year is different. This year, John suddenly finds himself in the writing room of famed Victorian novelist Charles Dickens, who sets out his new idea for a Christmas tale. Dickens invites John to watch rehearsals for the writing of the story. But as Dickens struggles through contentious negotiations with his amazingly independent characters, John wonders whether A Christmas Carol will ever be written. So, when John finds himself in the presence of Charles Dickens and his characters, the writer explains to John that he's going to think up a story in which John will be the main character. However, in the meantime, Dickens tells John he wants John to come with him as he negotiates with his Christmas Carol characters. He tells John that he needs him as a calming influence who can create a bridge between himself and his rebellious characters. But what, John wonders, is the obstacle that's keeping the Christmas Carol characters from cooperating with their maker, Charles Dickens? Well, here's the rehearsal that Dickens invites John to attend as Dickens explains his ideas to the Cratchit family. So let's go to Chapter 8, page 77. Oops, okay, here we are. So this is Dickens visiting the characters whom he has already created, the Cratchit family, to explain to them how he's going to write about them when and if they agree to let him do so. And John is invited along to watch that rehearsal. So here we are. "Look here, John," Dickens is saying. "Come closer and have a look. A mother and her children, young Peter, the girl Martha, and the two younger Cratchits. Cratchit, you see, is going to be the family name. They're huddled around the fireplace in search of a little warmth. See, a watery soup is all they will have to eat. The father will be a clerk in Scrooge's office. He will scratch out a living with his pen. Now, where is he? Oh, here he is, with his little boy upon his shoulder, come in at the door. See how the children all crowd around as the two of them enter the room. A loving family, John. A loving family, to be sure. And look at the crutch and the iron frame on the little limbs. Tiny Tim will be the name of the boy who is lame. But come on, John, let's get busy. Come along with me while I visit the Cratchit home." So that's scene 1 of the Dickens Cratchit rehearsal. Let's go to page 81 for scene 2. So Dickens rehearsing the Cratchits, or at least explaining to them how he'd like to write about them, and John having a look by invitation. Dickens takes the Cratchits by surprise. I land on both feet on the edge of the family scene. The children back away as Dickens launches into a speech. I hear no words, but I read them on his face. He is lying on the bare table, miming the succulence of the turkey. He sighs as he basks in the swelling heat of the oven. He smiles as he savors his own nose-tickling juices. He cringes as he awaits the first cut of the knife. Then he leaps back down to the floor and accosts the Cratchits one by one. He takes Mrs. Cratchit by the shoulders and moves her in front of the table. Then he moves Bob Cratchit aside. Dickens takes a jug from the hearth. In mime, there is no jug, and he almost burns his fingers So he seizes a protective rag, a comforter which he strips from the startled Bob Cratchit, and winds it around his hand as he lifts the imaginary jug and pours an imaginary drink into an imaginary glass. A spilled drop singes his forearm and he flinches momentarily, but he shrugs it off and pours a second glass, all without there being a single glass in the room. Then he mimes as Bob the picking up of a glass and the giving of a tender speech. Wordless for me, of course, but his eyes, the Dickens Cratchit eyes, are glowing brightly, and the Dickens Cratchit lips form a forgiving and resigned, yet kindly smile. Then he pauses while raising the glass, the imaginary glass, and takes Bob Cratchit by the shoulders and moves him into place, and then moves Mrs. Cratchit aside and mimes her part. Again, a mimed glass. He placed the first one and the comforter on the table a moment ago, but this time a troubled face. A Mrs. Cratchit Dickens face, a face with strong emotion and anguished thought. Love for her husband, anger at life, resignation dragging her down. A few bitter words that I can't hear, and finally she takes a sip from the glass, a Mrs. Cratchit Dickens sip that curdles her haggard features, and all the wretchedness of her life is there to see. The two Cratchits stare at Dickens as he plays their parts. I stand and admire the performance. No one seems to notice me. Dickens cannot resist a bow to end the scene. The two Cratchits do not respond, not with anything like glee, to Dickens's antics. Their minds are on something other than this cheerful, or is it tearful, Christmas scene. Okay, that's scene 2 of the Cratchits. Let's go to scene 3 over on page 84-85. Scene 3 of the Dickens Cratchit rehearsal. It's not exactly an argument as before. I don't hear a word. The two Cratchits sit down at the table with Mrs. Cratchit adjusting Bob's comforter as he shrugs it on. Dickens implores them. I watch and mime. The two Cratchits shake their heads. The Christmas characters refuse to budge. The children look from their parents to Dickens and back again. Dickens mimes Bob Cratchit carving. He sharpens the knife at an imaginary grindstone and sticks the plump, well-basted turkey with the fork. Slowly he carves the slices of turkey. His face is ecstatic at the smell. The succulence makes me hungry. I feel a knife and fork in my hands. Then he mimes scooping the potatoes hot and steaming from the bowl. A flagon of gravy, a treat to the eyes and the nose and the mouth, all in mime, as there is no gravy on the table nor anywhere else in the room. My mouth is watering as he speaks, but I hear no words. The young Cratchit's eyes grow wide. They are hungry, they're starving. They hope against hope that their parents will yield. The Cratchit parents refuse the offer and shake their heads. They have a resistance that Dickens, who made them, cannot believe. Now, in the passages that I've just read, Charles Dickens tried to persuade the Cratchits to go along with his plan to write the novella A Christmas Carol. Dickens has a clear agenda, and that is to write the book. The Cratchits raise objections to the writing of the book, but it's not clear at this point in the novella exactly why they are opposed. So we ask ourselves, what then is the Cratchit agenda? Well, let's look at some items of serious literature. In the Iliad, Homer writes about the Trojan War. We start with a divide. The Achaeans, whom we can call the Greeks, oppose the Trojans. All of the Achaean nations unite in a common cause against that of Troy. However, as the story goes on, we detect a shift in the alliances. The Achaeans are still Greek, but they become divided, and the division has to be based on something other than race. What has been a shared agenda is now a non-shared agenda among the various factions of the Achaean or Greek army. And that is why we find Achilles sulking in his tent, refusing to go out each day and fight against the Trojans, these people of another race. Later on, near the end of the Iliad, though not at the end of the Trojan War, we find that the Achaeans, the Greeks, who were divided, now unite against their opposed agenda foes, the Trojans, in a newly realized shared agenda. And their side wins a significant victory in the Trojan War. So it's clear that it's not race, but agenda, shared and not shared, shared and opposed, that is the topic of Homer's Iliad. All of the topics of the discussions, the arguments among the characters, are the surface topics of the dynamics of human nature. Now, if we look at 1984 by George Orwell, we see the same concerns. All of the social topics have changed between the time of the Trojan War in 1948, when the novel 1984 is written, even more so than they changed between the actual Trojan War and Homer's time. But the concerns of serious literature are still evident. The concerns of serious literature have not changed. We have in this novel three contending forces. The people of each continental society are told from time to time that alliances have shifted as the 2 against 1 alliances are formed and reformed. The reason is simple, that the agenda of each society remains the same, but that the means of preserving and promoting that agenda requires a different alliance from time to time. So both works of literary art, many centuries apart, contain references to the social issues of the time. However, the works of literature that contained only social references of the time are now forgotten. These 2 works of literature, the Iliad in 1984, as do all serious and lasting works of literature, are based on the bedrock of human interaction as it's always been, is now, and will always be. It's the need of every social group, whether of a nation, an ideology, a race, a gender, or a family, and of every individual, to form alliances which foster and further a shared agenda and which will aid in defense against an opposed agenda. All writers of serious literature, whether consciously or subconsciously, know that agenda is the basis of all serious literature because it is the basis of all human interaction. Now, this is my novella, John and Dickens, A Christmas Mystery. Okay, you can see the diagram there. Novella by John Passfield. It's found on Amazon, where there's more information. My publisher's website, roxbillspress.com. Ours, OCKSMILLSPRESS.com, has more information as well. And on my website, johnpassfield.ca, JOHNPASSFIELD.ca, there are 2 free books. Just click on the icon, and there's the text in front of you to read for free. A planning notebook, wherein I plan and write the novella, and a reflective journal in which I reflect on all the topics that such a story brings to mind. So have a look there if you're interested. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.